Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Identity politics. Is the United States becoming a racist country? You know, I love America. It is a good country based on Judeo-Christian values, they like to say. It is a country that was always about family and faith and opportunity. And it offered more rights than any other country in the world. Any little boy or girl that was born in the United States or in American territories, wherever they are around the world, were eligible to grow up and become the president of the United States. It was a place that had people who were racist, and it was a society that was gathering people from around the world, and so there were prejudices. And the Jewish people, of course, were also banned from clubs and all sorts of places. We had to struggle ourselves, but it wasn't the American system. It was just some people in America. However, today, what we're seeing is real systemic racism. And today, with this crazy new generation that we've raised, we're seeing people being branded as racist, even though they're not, but just by the color of their skin. Because today, according to many people, according to your peers, many of your peers, if you have white skin, you are automatically a racist. And this is reverse racism. And this is what is happening today in the United States, that great country, a country that today wants to defund their own police. This is a country ready for implosion. It makes me very sad. We're going to be discussing all of this on the show today. Don't go anywhere. Feel free to call in. This is a live show. We'll be right back.
Israel is located in one of the most volatile areas in the world. Israel is an island of stability in a sea of war and unrest. In the midst of this turmoil, Israel stands out as a beacon of order and human progress. Each week we update you on what's happening in this, the Jewish state, a true light unto the nations. This is Jay Shapiro. Join me every Thursday on Israel News Talk Radio.
All right, we are back here at the Tamar, Yonah Show on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, and we're talking about systemic racism, identity politics. Is the United States, that great country, becoming a racist country? You know, when I grew up in America, I never felt like America was a racist country. I knew that there were people who were racist. I knew that there are some people who had prejudices against other people. But the country itself, absolutely not. In fact, we learned to embrace each other. That's what our generation grew up on. Sadly, our children's generation grew up in something completely different. They grew up more on Marxism. They grew up more on the leftist agenda. And I remember figuring that out when I was helping a woman in my community who needed help with her English. She was getting her degree in, I think it was social work. And she was asking me to help her with her textbook, which was in English, because Israelis know English really well, because a lot of their textbooks are in English, and they get their degrees, they get their PhDs, etc. And there was certain words that she was having trouble with, and she asked if she could sit with me and ask me some of these words. And as I was looking through her textbook, it was talking about how we want to raise our children to be citizens of the world, global citizens, and not bring them up on patriotism, etc., etc. And when I read that, and this was before I knew anything about the New World Order and conspiracy theories, etc., I was much younger. I was thinking, this is strange. What do you mean not to be a patriot of your own country that you were brought up in? Not to love your country? And later on, it all made sense now that we see what's happening today. In order to become a global world, you have to destroy these nation states. And since America is a very strong country, you're going to have to rip her up from inside her own self, because foreign enemies trying to reach her shores is perhaps too hard. So get the people inside the United States to turn on each other. Do we have our guest, Dr. Francisco Gil-White, with us?
I'm right here.
Okay, good. So let me give you a proper introduction, because we did lose you at the first part of the segment here. Dr. Francisco Gil-White, I had him on last week. He's a political anthropologist and professor at ETAM University in Mexico City. He's also known for his extensive research, which examines what's driving world politics, movements, and agendas. And you can check out his website at hearhome.com. That's HIR home for historical investigative research. Again, hearhome.com. Welcome to the show, Dr. Francisco Gil-White.
Hi, Tamar. Thanks for having me.
All right, so we had you on last week, and we were talking about the left-wing demonstrations, the anarchists, the BLM, and all of these elements that are burning down cities, destroying, talking about we have to destroy in order to rebuild. And in fact, those are the same words, basically, that I heard Joe Biden saying in his campaign speeches about, I don't think he used the word destroy, but something about we have to, maybe somebody in the chat room can help me. Something like take down in order to rebuild, something like that. And it's kind of scary, because America was the most free place in the world. And even black people from Africa couldn't wait to be able to get a visa to go to America because of what America had to offer. So what kind of racist country was the United States if everybody from whatever continent you were on wanted to get in there?
Well, there's certainly been racism in the history of the United States. There's no question about that. It had a legacy of slavery and then a long period of Jim Crow. And it was only in the civil rights movement there was finally a revolution in consciousness that allowed the United States to mature towards a colorblind society. And that revolution, which was engineered chiefly by Martin Luther King and his movement, was tremendously successful. And it produced a transformation of, let us say, white consciousness, in the sense that white people in the United States realized that something had to change, and that it was important from now on to, well, let's say there was a recognition of social debts owed, if you will. And in fact, they were quite desperate to signal their new tolerance. And unfortunately, that new attitude, which was, I think, the ticket to build the colorblind society that Martin Luther King was dreaming of, that was leveraged by the new identity politics into this new game, in which instead the only thing that matters is the color of your skin or some other group that you belong. So your identity is the only thing that matters, and worth is established in identity politics on the basis of your group membership, not on the basis of what you do and say. And this is very bad because, as we were saying last time, what they did was weaponize the term people of color so that it excluded whites from all others. They created this symbolic isolation. And they used white contrition, in other words, the fact that whites recognized that society had to change and that there had been a lot of racism in U.S. society and that they had to build something new, that recognition by whites and their desperateness to signal their new tolerance was used by identity politics to create what we now call white guilt. In other words, to make whites always feel like they need to redeem their skin, so to speak. But not only are they made to feel that they have to redeem their skin, redemption is forever denied. So no matter what they do, they're always told they have to do more. No, it's not enough. Anything they do is supposed to be an expression of whiteness, which is now equated with white supremacy, which is ridiculous. And they're trapped in identity politics grammar. No matter what they do, they're always wrong. So what this is doing to the United States is very dangerous because after 50 years of this, and it has become increasingly dominant in that time period, it's been pushing whites into self-hatred. So now we have lots of young whites who hate the fact that they're white because they keep hearing that there's nothing good about it, that there's only negative stuff associated with being white, that they're being told that because they're white, they're necessarily racist, which is, of course, nonsense. But they hear it over and over again, that there's this white privilege and this sort of, how shall we say, that it's integrated into white culture.
Okay, you know what? Let me jump in for a second because for the blacks that grew up in the United States and in other places in the world, they were told the same thing. Because your skin is black, you can never redeem yourself. So it's just kind of like switched. That's a very good point. Yeah, that's a very good point, and that's exactly what racism is. So when people are told that there's something wrong with them because of their skin, and that it's something they cannot redeem, that's the very definition of racism. And that's exactly what was done to blacks for so long in the United States. And so what Martin Luther King was trying to do was move us from that kind of discourse to a new kind of understanding where we are truly colorblind, when the value of a person has absolutely nothing to do with the color of their skin, which is, I think, the way we should relate to each other. But what identity politics did was invert the earlier racist discourse. So instead of moving us towards a colorblind society, what they've been trying to do is create this new grammar where people of color are always right and whites are always wrong. Now, I don't know whether to move into this next discussion now or to wait after the break, because what I wanted to explain last time, but we ran out of time, is that this whole stuff began with the Arab-Israeli conflict. Or let us say it was a big part of how identity politics got started. So I would like to give your audience that context, if I may. Okay, well, we only have 90 seconds until the end of the segment, so you tell me if you want to start.
Well, I can set it up.
Okay.
So in the late 1960s, but especially in the early 1970s, as white was becoming a bad thing, white in this new sort of academic discourse of identity politics, white was equated with European colonialism, right? Imperialism, colonialism, white. These three things go together.
Which is true, by the way. It's true. The white people in the United States, at least, were colonialists.
Well, of course it's true. But what is not true is that if you were born in the mid-20th century in the United States, you have no responsibility for colonialism of earlier centuries. You didn't do any of that, right? It's not your fault, right? So what identity politics did was say, if you're white, you're guilty for everything that your ancestors did. You're guilty for all the imperialism. You're guilty for all the colonialism and so forth, right? This is what identity politics does. It says you're guilty because of the color of your skin, because of something that you have nothing to do with. It has to do with, who you were born, where you were born, right? How you were born.
Okay, hold that thought because we have to go to a break.
Sure.
We're going to be right back. If anybody has any comments or questions, we are live if you're listening between 7 to 8 a.m. Israel Holy Time, or if it's between midnight to 1 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time, it means that we are live and you can call into the show. We'll be right back.
The Tamar Yonah Show.
Tamar? She's sassy.
She's smart.
She's funny.
But she's also a real Jewish mother.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tamar Yonah. And yes, I can be all of those things, but at Israel News Talk Radio, I'm here to bring you the news stories and guests that you may not hear anywhere else. Join me live on air Sundays, Mondays, and Tuesdays for the most unique and bold talk radio in Israel.
The Tamar Yonah Show.
The return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel was prophesied in the Bible thousands of years ago and is coming true today. Shalom. Join me, Josh Wander, on Israel Unplugged. Listen in as we delve into the spiritual and physical aspects of the Jewish return to Zion. We'll discuss the biblically mandated, historic, and of course practical understandings of this incredible transition from exile to redemption. That's Israel Unplugged, every Monday on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com.
Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Did you know this psalm and many others were composed by a Jewish shepherd and musician who later became a king? Would you like to know some of the inner meanings of psalms to help you connect with God and strengthen your soul? An exciting and easy-to-read book is now available which will help you do just that. Software for the Soul, Psalms for Everyone, available on Kindle, Audible, and Amazon.com. Software for the Soul.
Modesty at the beach? It isn't just about body image, it's about feeling good. Modest swimsuits, so we don't get burned by the sun.
So we won't get ogled by strangers.
So we'll feel free to express ourselves without the need to expose ourselves.
Let Marcy Modest help you to cover up what you want, how you want.
Made in Israel. Visit marcymodest.com. That's MARSEA modest.com.
And get a 10% discount on your first purchase.
2 new shows on Israel News Talk Radio.
The return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel was prophesied in the Bible thousands of years ago and is coming true today. Shalom. Join me, Josh Wander, on Israel Unplugged. Listen in as we delve into the spiritual and physical aspects of the Jewish return to Zion. We'll discuss the biblically mandated, historic, and of course practical understandings of this incredible transition from exile to redemption. That's Israel Unplugged, every Monday on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com.
How did a nice Jewish girl from Delaware end up living in Israel? Shalom! I'm Natalie Sapinski. Join me on my show, Returning Home. Meet different people who have moved to Israel. Hear their personal stories, their highs, their lows, and everything in between. Each week, we talk to experts on immigration and the process of moving to Israel. Listen to Returning Home every Thursday, only on Israel News Talk Radio.
All right, we are back here at the Tamar Yonah Show on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, and we're talking about identity politics. Is the United States becoming a racist country? And the real systemic racism. Our guest is Dr. Francisco Gil-White, and he's talking to us about this. And take it away.
Thank you, Tamar. So, as I was explaining, late 1960s, early 1970s, this new identity politics grammar started being put together, and the basic sort of pillar here is that being white and being an imperialist and being a colonialist, an oppressor, all go together in this grammar. So that means that if you're white, you're wrong, you're an oppressor, and by grammatical sort of a symmetry. If you are a person of color, then you're right. You're the victim. You're the oppressed, and you have moral righteousness on your side. So this was very cleverly used to destroy the prestige of the state of Israel, because what they did was, I don't know if how many of your listeners are my age or older, but I'm right on the cusp. I was born in 1969, so I remember what it was like to be a kid in the 1970s. And in the 1970s, in my native Mexico, I remember everybody admired Israel. Israel was the good guy. They had just fought the War of 1967, which everybody remembered, very dramatic thing, and the War of 1973. And both times, a coalition of Arab countries had gotten together to attack Israel unprovoked, and they had announced in public that they meant to exterminate the Israeli Jews. And both times, the Israeli Jews had defeated all of these Arab countries together. So I could hear the adults say, wow, the Israelis, I mean, they've got their act together. I mean, these guys are amazing. So the let us say the presentation of the state of Israel was, well, this is the state that Holocaust refugees created, people running away from genocide. And they came to the Middle East, they created this incredible country, and people are still trying to killing them, but now they're kicking ass. They've really got their act together. It was nothing but admiration. And the, let us say, the moral presentation was, well, this is the persecuted underdog finally being able to defend itself, okay, from people who have no defense, from people who announce that they want to commit genocide, right? So it was David defending itself from Goliath. That was the presentation. And what identity politics did, and what a lot of mainstream media propaganda did, was turn David into Goliath. By the way, there's a very good book about this by Joshua Moravchik called, I think the title is Making David into Goliath, or something like that. It's really worth reading because it analyzes precisely this process. So what they did is, since they were, as we said, equating white with imperialist, with colonialist, with oppressor, with bad guy, the way to change the perception of Israel all around the world was to say that the Jews in Israel were white European imperialist colonialists who had come to the Middle East to dispossess the brown, Muslim, downtrodden natives. Okay? And they started harping on this over and over again. And the guy that got this to switch was the Austrian chancellor. His name was Bruno Kreiske. And he was simultaneously the Austrian chancellor and the leader of the international left, because he was vice president of the Socialist International. Okay? So in 1977, right as Carter was making moves to, raise the prestige of PLO Fatah and try to get some kind of peace process, quote unquote, started, so that PLO Fatah could have a chunk of Israeli land, Bruno Kreiske started reinforcing. Well, actually, he had been doing that from the early 1970s, right? So he had been.
I'm losing you a little bit. Can you get a little bit closer?
Get closer to the mic.
Yes.
Do that.
Great.
So Bruno Kreiske had been organizing. He organized a big to-do in. I believe it was in Germany or in Austria. I can't remember.
No, Francisco, I'm still losing you. Can you get closer to your modem? Even if there's an echo, that's okay.
I'm very close to my modem.
All right. Well, okay.
What shall I do?
I don't know what to tell you to do. Technician, what should he do? All right. He says just to keep going. It looks like the best we're going to get. Go ahead.
Okay. So Bruno Kreiske organized the big to-do, invited
Okay, we're having some problems because of we're speaking with Professor Francisco Gil White. He's in Mexico, and sometimes the internet is a little bit weaker when it's so in different countries. Francisco, just talk to me again for a moment.
Sure.
No, it's not getting better. Okay, we're going to try to call him back. Okay, we're going to hang up from you, and we're going to try to call you back. And I'm just going to send a note to our technician right here. And we're talking about identity politics, and we're talking about how to divide a nation, how to create victims. You know, I've seen that too. I've seen that with psychologists today, and this whole idea of being a victim, go back to your childhood and what happened there, and let's mash through it. You know, I want to say this. My father was a Holocaust survivor, is a Holocaust survivor. His entire family was killed except for his mother and brother who survived. His father was murdered by the Nazis, and his entire extended family murdered by the Nazis. Do we have Francisco Gil White still on with us?
You.
Okay, let me just finish the story, and we're going to see if your mic is going to be working better. And if he had taken this idea of I'm a victim, he never would have gotten anywhere. He would have been eating off of the Social Security of the United States. He would have been on welfare and take care of me because I'm a victim. But my father didn't do that. My father went out and he earned his PhD, and he put the Apollo rocket ship on the moon. And he is a great man because he did not consider himself a victim, even though he was. If anyone's a victim, he was. But he didn't look at himself that way. And when you create this victimhood, you create number one, a pawn to be able to move as chess pieces anywhere you want because they're dependent on the dole. I hope I'm using the right word of the economy, and they're your pawns, and they don't go out and make anything of themselves. And that's the way I think that things need to be. That we need to move on, move past things. And now I see history is taking us completely backwards. Professor Francisco Gil White, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, well, I agree with that. It's taking it backwards.
Okay, again, we've lost him. Okay, we're going to hang up for you, and we're going to try to phone you, all right? And we're going to try to see if we can fix this problem. So going on that note, what I was talking about, being a Holocaust survivor, there are some people, I know people in the United States who are psychologists, and they talk with people, and they talk about their victimhood and trauma, and if they need to be explored, then you need to explore it. But to label yourself a victim, to act constantly like a victim and not grow out of that space and claim your seat, so to speak, claim your place in this world, then this is going to make for a very poor you and sick society. And that's what we see happening in the United States. My mother became a social worker in the United States. As an adult, she went back to school, and she was one of her assignments and her projects was to look at generational families on welfare. And she would go to the welfare office, and she would see people there, and you would see the grandmother and the mother and the children going there, I think it was every month, to pick up their welfare check. And this was like a routine thing with them. There was no father in the home. The kids brought their toys, and they would play on the floor because they knew the routine. And this is what they would do for the rest of their lives. And this was a generational thing. The grandmother, and then the mother, and then the kids. And that's how it was. But this doesn't make for a healthy or strong society. And this also makes a division. It makes a lot. This is actually what U.S. President Donald Trump is talking about, that he was able to employ many people from whatever race they were and bring these people up, get them off welfare, having them claim their seat in the world. And to look at yourself entirely all the time as a victim, or to point to others all the time as your oppressors and not take responsibility. Now, I can understand if you're in jail, if you're a prisoner, if you are in the Holocaust, you can point to your oppressors, yes. But when you're living in a free generation, a free world, where there is that opportunity that the United States gave you to always try to point out oppressors and not move on and claim your seat, this is a failed system.
In a time where feelings have become fact, where rational thought and common sense has disappeared, one man stands above it all.
I'm Howie Sobiker, your political hitman.
Political Hitman airs every Tuesday at 11:59 p.m. North American time, 7 a.m. Israeli time, only on Israel News Talk Radio.
Are you interested in transforming your life, drawing closer to the Creator, and uncovering the deeper meanings and hidden treasures in the Hebrew Bible?
Then join me, Rav Yitzhak Michelson,
and me, William Hall,
on The Science of Kabbalah, where we are seeking to narrow the gap between what we understand of our physical and spiritual worlds. So make sure to tune in every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Israel time, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, here on Israel News Talk Radio.
All right, we're back here at the Tamar Yonah Show on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. We're talking about identity politics. Is the United States becoming a racist country, and the real systemic racism? Our guest is Dr. Francisco Gil White, and we're having a little bit of connection problems, but Dr. Francisco Gil White, I want you to come in and go for the kill. So last segment, go ahead.
I'll try to do that. So anyway, there's not time to give you too many historical details, but the point is that several people, and one of them, very important one, was Bruno Kreiske, because he was the leader of the Socialist International at the same time that he was the Austrian Chancellor. So he was instrumental. He took the lead in turning the left against Israel on the basis of identity politics, because you see, Israel was very, very popular with the left up until the mid-1970s, because it was the only place in the world where collectivized agriculture was working voluntarily. So the prestige
You're talking about the
of Israel
kibbutz.
was, excuse me?
You're talking about the kibbutz.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
So it was the prestige of Israel with the international left was gigantic. So what identity politics did was represent Israel as, or the Israelis as, white Europeans come to take the land of brown people in the Middle East, and that meant that they had to be wrong, and therefore the brown people had to be right. This is how identity politics works. You talk about people's skin color, and on the basis of that, you determine worth and moral righteousness. Now, of course, this was a complete distortion, because if you want to talk about white imperialism, nobody's been a bigger victim of white imperialism and colonialism than the Jews, right? The Jews had been killed in Europe for centuries by white power structures, and they arrived in the Middle East, those that did, because some Jews had always lived there, but those that did arrive from Europe did so fleeing persecution, right? So there's no sense in which you can say this is an offshoot of European imperialism, but that's how it was represented. And it's also false to say that, Israeli Jews are mostly Europeans. In fact, the majority of them come from Arab countries. They were expelled after 1948 from all the Arab countries, and a majority of Israeli Jews are, in fact, Mizrahim. So they're as brown as you know, any Arab.
Yeah.
But this worked, right? So this entire redefinition of what's right and wrong on the basis of skin color that the left adopted worked to destroy Israel's prestige. And it's a big betrayal of what the left used to be, because the left used to be the place where you fight racism. That used to be the homeland of anti-racism, was the left. And now the left, through identity politics, has adopted precisely the worldview that supposedly was defeated in 1945, which is the worldview that some people are by birth bad and some people are by birth good, right? And that the people who are by birth good have to totally defeat the people who are by birth bad. You know, this is what they're turning the United States into now. So now you were saying earlier, you were making the point about how, say, in the 1950s still, black people were being made to feel bad just because they were black. There was all this self-esteem problems, kids growing up feeling rotten because they couldn't feel good about being black and so forth. And that's terrible. And this is what they're doing now to white kids. So an entire generation of white kids is growing up feeling bad about the fact that they're white, as if that were a stain on them, as if it was something that they have to redeem, but they can't redeem. And that's not any better. And it's having two effects. It's creating white self-hatred. I know the Jews know a lot about self-hatred. So do the blacks. Well, now the whites are getting it too. That's not making a better world. And those who are not going into white self-hatred are being tempted by white supremacism. Because if you're being told all the time that there's no way to redeem your white skin, that you're bad, that you're wrong, etc., sooner or later, you're going to get fed up. And that's going to make white supremacist ideologies attractive. And so what's very dangerous about this is that the relentless racism of the identity politics on the left is going to feed the growth of white supremacism on the right. And then these two movements are going to gobble up everything in between. And then what you're going to get is a civil war. This is a real possibility now. Now, the good news is that there's something called pluralistic ignorance. Pluralistic ignorance is when you think you're in the minority, but you're in fact in the majority. And the reason you think you're in the minority is that all of the people that are with you in the silent majority are not speaking up. So you are unduly impressed by the little minority that's making all the noise and that's making you think that's the majority. And that's exactly what's going on. There's a book right now, Tamar, that is a bestseller by this lady, Robin DiAngelo. It's called White Fragility. Everybody's reading it. It's a big bestseller. And the point this woman makes is precisely what I've been saying. She claims that if you're white, you're a racist. If you're white, the fact that your skin is white makes you a bad person. This is what she's saying. By the way, she's white. And you'd think, from looking at the Amazon page for her book, that this is a very popular book because 75% of the reviews on Amazon by the readers are 5-star reviews. But when you look a little closer, you see a different picture. Amazon allows people to rate the reviews. And the top-rated review is a review that pans the book, that strongly attacks it. That's the one readers find most helpful.
Okay, we only have like another 4 minutes left, less than that, in fact. And you brought up a very important point that God forbid, because of this hatred now of the white-skinned people in America, that this is going to empower the extreme white groups like the white Nazi party in the United States, et cetera, and that this could cause a civil war. And this is exactly perhaps what the left wants, is a civil war, because it weakens America, and then America will get in line with the global world. Would you agree? Could you disagree?
Well, you were making the point at the very beginning that this looks like an attack from the outside. But I do not agree with that, Tamar. And I've been with you on many shows, and I've explained when I've been here that there's a big problem with the U.S. ruling elite. I don't think Americans in general are racist. I think they have an excellent ideology. But I don't think the same is true of the people who run the country. We've talked about eugenics. We've talked about the role of the U.S. ruling elite in financing the growth of eugenics in Germany, which became the German Nazi Party, and so forth. And those people never left. There was never a revolution to remove them from power in the United States. They're still there. And this identity politics attack on American citizens was directed by them. The people who produced this were Marxist teachers at U.S. universities. They've got an enormous amount of support by university administrators who, in fact, answer to university boards of trustees, which are run by the big-time capitalists that run the United States.
Okay, so we only have 2 minutes left. What do we need to do? What is the answer?
Well, we need to go back to Martin Luther King's message for the United States and for the world. We need to build a colorblind world. Color of your skin doesn't tell you who you are. It doesn't tell you how good you are, how bad you are. It's completely irrelevant. The only thing that matters to moral worth is what you do. It's what you say, what you stand for, the things you defend. That's the only thing that matters. People cannot be judged on the basis of the skin. That's ridiculous. The only way to build a society of tolerance and brotherhood is to become colorblind. We need to love one another, as Leviticus says, Leviticus 19:18, love your brother as you love yourself. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Well, there's no way that we can be loving our brother as we love ourselves if we evaluate our brother's moral worth on the basis of their skin color.
Right. And if we all remember that we all stem from the same mother and father, Noah. And before Noah, Adam and Eve. We're all brothers and sisters, and absolutely. But in the last minute that you have, what do Americans today need to do? I mean, it's nice to talk about it. Yeah, we should all, sing Kumbaya.
I think all this energy to fight systemic racism should be directed against the war on drugs. Because the war on drugs is systemic racism. That's what's been destroying black neighborhoods. Black people are right that the system is not helping them. This is true. A lot of black people are in jail. Incredible, gigantic numbers of people are in jail. And most of those people end up in jail because of possession of drugs for use. And that's ridiculous. The things you put in your body are your business. You want to poison yourself? That's your business. The state has no business directing violence against you because you wanted to breathe or digest something.
Okay, you wrote an article on this on your website?
Excuse me?
Did you write an article about this on your website people can go to read?
I will be publishing an article about all of this that we've discussed on my website in the next couple of days.
Okay, so hearhome.com. You can agree, you can disagree. I'm not sure if I agree with him or not about legalizing drugs. I understand why, because I read his article. He sent it to me before the show. I understand his position, and it has merit. However, I'm very conservative in certain things. But maybe we can save that for another show, Francisco.
I'm very happy to.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much for being with us, and thank all of you. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to write me, Tamar at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. I will forward all emails to the good doctor. Thank you for being with us. Bye-bye. Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
Howdy, this is Rita from League City, Texas, now living in Israel. And though my heart may have belonged to Texas, it now belongs to Israel and all the fantastic show hosts at Israel News Talk Radio.
Hi, this is Michael Solomon from Kiryat Arba, Israel. And why do I love listening to Israel News Talk Radio? Because I love listening to the interesting interviews they do and their news reporting that most other media sources don't cover.
Hey, this is Nicoleko from Malmö, Sweden. It gets pretty cold here in Sweden, so I love cuddling up with a warm cup of tea while I listen to Israel News Talk Radio.
Hey everybody, this is Frank Morris from Tennessee. Me and my dog Buster really love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.